The World Bank economists Jonathan Lane and Jacob Angel, in a post published on the bank's blog, have listed global pandemic, rising inflation, ongoing uncertainty related to the war in Ukraine, and the relentless population growth as factors that have made Nigeria's poverty reduction goals more challenging than ever. According to the two economists, Nigeria's aspiration to lift its entire people out of poverty by 2030 presents a serious challenge. They added that even before COVID-19, 4 in 10 Nigerians lived below the national poverty line, some 80 million people. Now let's address these factors and how they affect Nigeria's goal to lift its citizens out of poverty by 2030. And joining us to make sense of this is Mr. Olusegun Okwade, the chairman, Ikeja District Society of ICANN. Hello, Mr. Olusegun. Good to have you on board.
Good morning, Perpetua, and good morning to our viewers this morning. My pleasure to be here always.
Thank you. It's good to have you also. Now, let's get started. The World Bank economists have stated that the global pandemic, rising inflation, ongoing uncertainty related to the war in Ukraine, combined with relentless population growth, have made Nigeria's poverty reduction goals more challenging than ever. Now, I want to address each of these factors, and we're going to be looking at their impact on the economy, starting with the global pandemic.
Thank you very much. The global pandemic that happened 2019, 2020, actually created a bottleneck for several businesses, and that was actually been a global problem, affected so many economy. Even the developed country felt the impact. But when you look at us compared to Nigeria, you ask yourself the question that when some economy are actually coming up after some of these global issues, why is Nigeria not coming up even to bring up and reduce the poverty level of its people? And that we can take more down to the insensitive nature of the government as regards the corruption. One of the cardinal points of this administration is to fight corruption, but we've seen that it has not been deliberate on their part to challenge the status quo as regards this corruption. And it has entered into us to the extent that it has affected every sphere of our economy. And this I will share with you when it just concluded primaries of the big width of our political parties, where we read and was in the public space of how dollars are actually moving up and down, and the businesses that could do the productive aspect of the economy struggle to even get those dollars to do so. This is one of the basic factors that Nigeria is just not deliberate about to move people out of poverty. Even after the global crisis, we've seen several economies come out of this, and now they are bouncing out. But for us, because of the epidemic nature of the corruption, we have seen ourselves nose diving rather than climbing up the ladder economic-wise.
All right, let's look at inflation, really, the rising inflation. What's happening? Isn't the government doing enough to address this?
Yeah, when it comes to inflation, our nation generally is import-based. And any economy that is not productive on its own relies solely on practically everything that it makes use of to be import-based will definitely have crisis with its inflation. And that's why you've seen that in the last few years, rather than it coming down, it has been going up. You know the challenges that the businesses are facing, because it's the businesses that make the economy to grow. So many of them are having the problem of infrastructure, problem of power. As I yesterday, I learned that diesel has risen up to the level of 780 per liter. And I'm sure it's not news that there was system collapse. We've had about 7 of such in the last between January and now. And these are some of the things that assist the business to grow. And if the businesses are not growing, how do you expect them to contribute their quota to the economic base? This has actually been another factor that has aided inflation. Even though the CBN are doing everything humanly possible on their side, the cost of foreign exchange, the cost of power maintenance, alternative power, lack of infrastructure have actually aided inflation on its path. And basically, some of the things that we are producing is not competitive even with the outside world. So we resorted into the shortcut of importing majority of these things, which is putting serious pressure on our foreign exchange. And that's why you see everything keeps going up rather than coming down.
Talking about the foreign exchange, we know how this has been a challenge and how that the CBN is even trying to ameliorate the situation via the I&E window. Even that, a lot of persons have also criticized that, saying that it's actually affecting our reserve. What can be done really to address this issue? What else can be done?
Yeah, I think government just needs to be intentional about it. How can we try as much as possible to domesticate some of the things that we are doing so that we reduce the pressure on our dollar rate? It's quite disheartening when I read the news and I heard in the public space of political elites, trying to exchange, even if you are going to motivate your delegates and all that. I think that we should domesticate and do with Naira base rather than using dollars. But because, when you hold $100, you know the value of it. So I think to your question, government should be intentional in making sure that majority of the things are domesticated, and we have this leeway of exchanging our currency with other ones rather than just making sure that everything we do are dollarized. That's a big threat to our currency, because the more you go ahead to procure things from the outside world, you put so much pressure on the little supply that CBN is able. And when your demand outweighs your supply, all you enjoy is an increase in the cost of that particular thing. So I think government should be intentional about making sure that most of the things that we do are localized, we domesticate it, and we enjoy that locally so that we can exchange our currency rather than making use of the dollar, which has been the order of the day for people to transact their business.
Okay, now let's look at population. Do you think that is really one of the factors affecting poverty alleviation in Nigeria?
My answer to you, Perpetua, is no. If you look at China, if you look at India, they actually capitalize on their population to utilize it for the growth of the economy. But reverse is our case, because the economy itself is not productive. In a productive economy, our population will be a big advantage, because if you give room for cheap labor, and you can see that most of the things that are being built or created or manufactured are taking to country. Is huge because there is cheap labor there. How do you see the production of any of these commodities, even in the Europe world, being produced by them? They take it to China because that will give room for cheap labor. But reverse is our case, because our economic, our business environment is not conducive for businesses to come in. So the hostility push them away, and we are unable to capitalize on our population to give cheap labor. At least in the African setting, Nigeria should have been strategic for people to come in, bring in factories, knowing fully well that you have the wherewithal, the manpower to carry that out, irrespective of it, and will be cheaper for you. But reverse is the case, and it's quite pathetic.
All right, you mentioned something about the fact that Nigeria should be that place where so many companies should be coming into and all of that. That talks about foreign direct investment. But then we saw that there was a decline in the last quarter. How can the federal government, work on that to ensure that the environment is conducive enough for people to come in and do business here in Nigeria?
Yeah, I think the first area that I want to speak about is security. The second one is security, and the third is security. If the environment is well secure, there won't be any threat for any foreign direct investment into the country. People are actually scared and skeptical, in the sense that if I go ahead and invest so much in this economy, somebody can come overnight because of threats or because of not just wanting them to be and destroy a multi-billion investment that you have done. So I think the area government needs to concentrate on is to make sure that the environment is well secure. A peace loving environment is a growing environment. If there is no security, then there will be threats to a foreign direct investment, and also building of infrastructure. If you have a well-structured infrastructure where we have good roads, good road networking, power supply that is available for us, not you spending so much on alternative power supply, definitely it will attract foreign direct investment, because no foreigner will want to come and invest in an atmosphere where their cost of production outweigh what they are going to sell. So you want to have the minimum cost so that you can make little margin or whatever you are doing. So to answer that question, I think security plays a major role. Then the development of our infrastructure in such a way to make sure that it is not the business themselves that are investing more in the infrastructure, but they are already provided by the government. That will really assist and attract foreign direct investment into our economy.
All right, let's look at the latest edition of the NDU, which highlights that the inflationary pressures will be compounded by the fiscal pressures and that Nigeria will face this year. And that's because of the ballooning cost of gasoline subsidies at a time when oil production continues to decline. Now, oil marketers had earlier said that the cost of diesel would keep increasing and might hit 1,500 naira per litre in the next 2 weeks if nothing drastic was done. What exactly can be done? Well, we'll take a break in a moment, and when we return, we'll have that question answered by our guest, Olushe Sonkwade. Stay with us, don't go away. Welcome back. Well, just before we went on that break, we were talking about the latest edition of the NDU highlighting that the inflationary pressures will be compounded by the fiscal pressures Nigeria will face this year. And this is because of the ballooning cost of gasoline subsidies. And this is at a time when oil production continues to decline. Also, we hear news that diesel might cost up to 1,500 naira per litre. These are some of the issues, really. Sheson, please help us. How do we solve these issues?
Yeah, well, it still goes back to what I said the other time. I think out of the OPEC country, Nigeria seems to be the only nation where crude oil are being exported to other nations to be processed for us to utilize it. And this has been part of the things we've been clamoring for, that we should try and process some of these crude oil products and satisfy even our demand before we start thinking of exporting them out. You have the crude oil, you have your quota that is actually being shared with OPEC, which is about 1.4 billion barrels, that is expected, that we are even still struggling to meet. But we can look at that the excess from some of these crude oil that is being produced on daily basis can be processed or refined locally. And when you do that, what are you doing? You are creating employment. You are, cushioning the economy system, and you are relaxing the pressure on the foreign exchange. Because what we have seen these days is that most of the products, when it's been sent out, refined, and it's to be brought back to the nation. What do we use in paying back some of these things? All the marketers have to go back to the foreign, to CBN, to source of foreign exchange, and push those things back. So I think government should be intentional in building refineries for us, because we know that the old ones have actually been moribund. So much turnaround maintenance has been done on them with huge costs, and it's not giving us the dividend that is expected. I think they can divert that to make sure that we have a refinery that can refine our products domestically, of which we can meet the demand of the people. Not only holding on to the private sector like Dangote. Government himself should create an enabling environment. If they cannot do it, make the private sector comes in like we have with Dangote and some other ones, so that we can be self-sufficient as a nation, rather than always importing basically those things that we need. It's quite disheartening that that might happen, because as at last month, think we are still at 500, and as of today, usually it's talking about 780 to 800. And you know that the telecoms rely on this diesel because of the incessant collapse of grid. Other businesses that operate like yourself that must be on 24/7, you rely so much on diesel. I think government will be doing us fair justice by looking at way of refining some of these products rather than importing them.
All right. Well, trade presents one vital but, of course, often untapped pathway to poverty reduction. Now, how can we, catalyze private investment to boost job creation, by improving the transparency of key government to business services and, eliminating trade restrictions?
Yeah, I think that area we just need to look at the accountability on the part of the government. You discover that so many things is actually happening with the government agency in area of accountability. That is not sustainable when it comes to the private sector. I think government should be intentional to on their part to let's have what exactly are we trading. We know our major source of income is the crude oil. How much of it are we pushing out? How much of it are we doing on our expenses? And the cost of governance needs to be checked into in such a way that we can have other areas to concentrate on. So if this can be worked upon, we discover that we'll have a better and robust economy that will reduce the poverty level. One thing you should give to this to the citizen of this country is that we are very, very creative. The only thing that is obstructing our creativity, that seems that the people in the developed world seems to be better than us, is because there is no conducive environment for us to do. But when we travel out of the country and people are out there, we see them doing a lot of things. They are always the backbone of the success of some of the developed nations. But when they come back home, you discover that you don't even have power supply for you to think right, and these are pressures that we are faced with. I think government should just be intentional about putting certain things in place for the businesses to grow. And when the businesses grow, you are giving room for more taxes to be paid. And when the taxes are paid, that is more revenue for the government to do certain things that is expected of them if they are able to cut through the cost of governance.
All right, thank you so much, Lucius Son-Ukwade, for your time on the show. Thanks for your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Perpetua, for having me, and I appreciate the team and all our viewers for their time with us this morning.
All right.